The warning alarm screamed in Kirathex's ears as her small scout ship spun out of control. Red lights flashed across the control panel while smoke filled the tiny cockpit. She gripped the controls with her four-fingered hands, trying to keep the ship steady as it fell toward the planet below. "No, no, no," she whispered in her native language. The Zephyrian raiders had come out of nowhere. One moment she was scanning the empty space around Xerion Prime, and the next moment, energy. Blasts were tearing through her ship's hull. The ground rushed up to meet her. Kirathex closed her large, dark eyes and held on tight. The ship hit the rocky surface with a grinding crash that threw her against the wall. Pain shot through her left arm and she tasted blood in her mouth. When everything stopped moving, Kirathex lay still for a moment. Her pointed ears picked up the sound of her ship's systems dying one by one. The lights went out, leaving her in darkness. She reached for her emergency pack and felt around until she found a small light dot. The beam showed her the damage. Her beautiful scout ship was now a twisted wreck of metal and broken glass. The communication system sparked and went dead as she watched. Her energy weapons sat in their holders, but their power cells were cracked and useless. Kirathex climbed out of the wreck and looked around. She stood in a valley between tall red rocks. The air was thin but breathable. In the distance, she could see the ruins of an old mining station. It was her only choice for shelter. She gathered what supplies she could carry. A medical kit, some food packs, her broken communicator, and a small scanner that still worked. Her people, the Villani, were not warriors. They were explorers and scientists. Kirathex had never been in a real fight in her life. The walk to the mining station took an hour. Her injured arm throbbed with each step. The old buildings were empty and covered in dust. Broken machines lay scattered around the main complex, but the walls were thick and some of the doors still worked. Kirathex found a small room deep inside the main building. She sealed the door and used her medical kit to treat her wounded arm. The scanner showed that nothing was broken, but the pain was getting worse. She tried to fix her communicator, but the damage was too severe. Even if she could get it working, her rescue team was 3 days away. They would not even know she was missing until tomorrow. As night fell, Kirathex heard something that made her blood run cold. War chants echoed across the valley. The Zephyrians had found her crash site, and they were coming. She had heard stories about the Zephyrians all her life. They were tall, gray-skinned warriors who lived for battle. They took prisoners only to sell them as slaves. Their weapons could cut through metal like paper, and their ships could destroy entire cities. Kirathex looked at her scanner. 12 heat signatures were moving toward the mining station. They would be here within the hour. She tried to think of a plan, but what could she do? Her weapons were dead. She had no way to call for help. The Villani were peaceful people who solved problems with words and science, not violence. The Zephyrians would find her, and that would be the end. She would become another slave in their empire, if they did not kill her first. Kirathex sat in the dark room and listened to the chants getting closer. Her people had legends about a mysterious race called humans. Some said they were warriors, without equal. Others claimed they were just stories told to frighten children. Most believed they had died out long ago, if they had ever existed at all. She wished the stories were true. She wished a human warrior would appear and save her. But wishes would not stop the Zephyrians from breaking down her door. The first explosion shook the building. The Zephyrians were using their plasma charges to blast through the outer walls. Kirathex checked her scanner again. They were spreading out to surround the building. There was no way to escape. Another explosion closer this time. Dust fell from the ceiling and cracks appeared in the walls. The Zephyrians were enjoying themselves. They could have killed her quickly, but they preferred to hunt their prey like animals. Kirathex stood up and faced the door. If she was going to die, she would die standing. She picked up a piece of broken metal from the floor. It was not much of a weapon, but it was better than nothing. The war chants were right outside now. She could hear the Zephyrians talking to each other in their harsh language. They were arguing about who would get to kill her first. A third explosion blew open the outer door. Bright lights flooded the corridor outside her room. Heavy footsteps echoed through the building as the raiders entered. "Little spy," called one of them in broken Villani. "We know you are here. Come out and we will make it quick." Kirathek said nothing. She gripped her makeshift weapon and tried to control her breathing. Her heart was beating so fast, she was sure they could hear it. The footsteps came closer. They were checking each room one by one. She could hear them laughing and making jokes about what they would do to her. "Found something," called another voice. "Fresh blood on the floor. She went this way." Kirathex closed her eyes and tried to remember her family, her parents back on the Villani homeworld, her younger brother who wanted to be an explorer like her. She hoped they would remember her as someone who tried to do her duty, even when she was afraid. The door handle turned slowly. This was it. This was how her story would end, alone and afraid on a dead world far from home. But then something strange happened. A new sound cut through the night air, a deep roaring noise that grew louder and louder. The Zephyrians stopped talking. Even their leader sounded confused. "What is that?" one of them asked. Through the broken walls, Kirathek saw a streak of fire racing across the dark sky. It looked like a falling star, burning bright against the stars. The roaring sound grew, deafening as whatever it was crashed into the valley with tremendous force. The ground shook so hard that everyone fell down. The lights went out, and for a moment, everything was silent. Then the Zephyrians started shouting orders. Their leader was angry that something had interrupted their hunt. But Kirathex felt something she had not felt since her ship was shot down. Hope. Jake Morrison woke up hanging upside down in his pilot seat. Blood dripped from a cut on his forehead, and his ears rang from the crash. The control panel of his cargo ship was completely dark, except for one red warning light that blinked over and over. Well, that could have gone better, he said to himself. Jake had been flying cargo runs for 5 years, but he had never had an engine blow up like that. One moment he was cruising through space, and the next moment his ship was falling toward the nearest planet like a brick. He unbuckled his safety harness and dropped to what used to be the ceiling. Everything hurt, but nothing seemed broken. Jake was a tough man who had learned to handle pain during his time in the military. He grabbed his emergency kit and his weapons case. Inside the case were his favorite rifle, a pistol, and enough ammunition for a small war. Jake never traveled without them. Space was a dangerous place, and cargo pilots made good targets for pirates. The ship's cargo hold was twisted open like a tin can. Most of his delivery was scattered across the ground, but some of the crates had survived. Jake smiled when he saw that the important stuff was still in one piece. He climbed out of the wreck and looked around. The planet was all red rocks and dust. The air was thin but good enough to breathe. In the distance he could see lights and hear voices. Someone else was on this rock and they sounded angry. Jake opened one of the surviving crates and pulled out his armor. It was not as fancy as the energy shields that other species used, but it had kept him alive through 2 wars and a dozen pirate attacks. The metal plates were scratched and dented, but they still fit perfectly. He loaded his rifle and checked his other gear. Explosives, medical supplies, and a device his military friends had given him for emergencies. Jake hoped he would not need it, but experience had taught him to prepare for the worst. The voices were getting closer. Jake could not understand the language, but he recognized the tone. These were hunters, and they had found something they wanted to kill. Jake moved carefully through the rocks toward the sounds. His military training kicked in automatically. Stay low, move quiet, and never walk into a fight without knowing what you are facing. He reached the top of a ridge and looked down into the valley. Below him was an old mining station surrounded by tall, gray-skinned aliens. They carried weapons that glowed with energy and wore armor that looked more advanced than anything humans had. But Jake was not impressed by fancy gear. He had fought aliens before, and he knew that the best technology in the galaxy was useless if you did not know how to use it properly. The aliens were spread out around the building, but they were making mistakes. They were talking too loud, standing in the open, and not watching their backs. These were not soldiers. They were bullies who were used to picking on weaker enemies. Jake counted 12 of them. Bad odds for most people, but Jake had faced worse. During the Titan Rebellion, he had held off 30 pirates with nothing but a broken rifle and a box of grenades. He studied the building where the aliens were trying to get inside. Someone was in there, and that someone was in trouble. Jake did not know who it was, but he had a rule about bullies. When you see someone picking on the weak, you make them stop. Jake worked his way down the ridge until he was behind the aliens. They were so focused on their prey that they did not notice him moving through the shadows. The first alien died without making a sound. Jake's knife slid between the plates of his armor and found his heart. The second alien turned around just in time to see Jake's rifle pointing at his face. The shot echoed across the valley. The other aliens spun around looking for the source of the noise. They saw their dead friend and started shouting in their own language. "Contact!" Their leader yelled in words Jake could understand. "We are under attack." Jake was already moving to his next position. He had learned long ago that staying in one place during a fight was a good way to die. The aliens fired their energy weapons at where he had been, but Jake was already somewhere else. He threw a grenade into the middle of their group. The explosion sent 3 aliens flying and broke their formation. The survivors scattered, looking for cover behind rocks and broken machinery. "What is it?" one of them shouted. "What is shooting at us?" Jake smiled. Fear was his best weapon. Scared enemies made mistakes, and mistakes got them killed. He picked off another alien with a long-range shot, then moved again before they could find him. The aliens were firing at shadows now, wasting their ammunition and revealing their positions. Jake had fought in enough battles to know when the tide was turning. The aliens were tough and well-armed, but they had no idea how to fight an enemy they could not see. He worked his way toward the building where their target was hiding. If someone was inside, they might be able to help. At the very least, Jake could make sure the aliens did not get what they came for. The alien leader was smart enough to realize they were in trouble. He started barking orders, trying to get his people organized. But it was too late. Jake had already cut their numbers in half, and the survivors were too scared to think straight. Jake reached the building and found a hole in the wall where the aliens had blown their way inside. He could hear movement in the corridors beyond. Someone was still alive in there. He slipped through the hole and followed the sound of footsteps. The corridor was dark, but Jake's eyes had adjusted to the low light. He moved carefully, checking each room as he passed. At the end of the corridor, he found a door that was slightly open. Light leaked out from inside, and he could hear breathing. Jake approached slowly, not wanting to scare whoever was hiding. "Hello?" he called softly. "Are you hurt?" The breathing stopped. After a moment, a voice answered in a language Jake did not recognize. It sounded female and very scared. Jake tried again, speaking slowly and clearly. "I am here to help. The bad guys are dead." There was a long pause. Then the door opened a little wider, and Jake got his first look at an alien who was not trying to kill him. She was small and thin, with blue skin and large dark eyes. Her left arm was wrapped in bandages, and she held a piece of metal like a weapon. She looked at Jake with a mixture of fear and hope. Jake slowly lowered his rifle and raised his hands to show he meant no harm. He had no idea what species she was, but she was clearly not one of the gray-skinned warriors outside. "Friend," he said, pointing to himself. Then he pointed outside where explosions and gunfire could still be heard. "Enemy." The alien woman nodded, slowly. She understood. Jake smiled and offered her his hand. It was time to finish what the bullies had started. Kirathek stared at the strange being who had just saved her life. He was unlike any alien she had ever seen in the databases. His skin was pale pink, and hair grew from the top of his head. He walked on 2 legs like her people, but he was much thicker and more muscular. Most surprising of all were his weapons. Instead of the elegant energy rifles used by advanced civilizations, he carried crude metal devices that threw small projectiles. His armor was simple plates of metal instead of sophisticated energy shields. Yet he had killed 6 Zephyrian warriors in minutes. The alien pointed to a small device on his belt and spoke slowly. "Translator," he said. After a moment, the device began to work, and Kirathex heard his words in her own language. "My name is Jake Morrison," he said. "I am human. What is your name?" Kirathex had heard that word before. Human, the mysterious warriors from the edge of the galaxy, but the legend said they were 10 feet tall with claws and fangs. This human looked almost normal except for his strange appearance. "I am Kirathex of the Villani Federation," she replied. "You are really human?" Jake nodded. "Really human, and those gray guys outside are really dead if they do not leave soon." He checked his weapon and looked toward the door. "How many more are coming?" "This is just a scouting party," Kirathex said. "But when they do not report back, more will come. Many more." Jake smiled, but it was not a happy expression. "Good. I was getting bored." Kirathex did not understand. How could he be happy about facing more enemies? "There will be hundreds of them, with ships and heavy weapons. We should run while we can." "Running is good sometimes," Jake said. "But sometimes you have to make a stand. Besides, I have something they want." He led her outside through the hole in the wall. The valley was quiet now, except for the crackling of fires where his explosives had done their work. Bodies lay scattered around the mining station, and the survivors had retreated to the rocks. "What do they want?" Kirathex asked. Jake pointed toward the crash site where his ship lay broken. "I was carrying some special cargo, military stuff. If the Zephyrians get their hands on it, they will cause a lot of trouble for a lot of people." They moved carefully through the ruins toward his ship. Jake taught her how to move without making noise and how to use cover to stay hidden. Kirathex was amazed at how much he knew about fighting. "Are all humans warriors?" she asked. "Not all," Jake said. "But most of us know how to fight when we have to. My people have been at war for most of our history. We learned to be good at it, or we died." At the crash site, Jake opened one of the surviving cargo containers. Inside were weapons unlike anything Kirathex had ever seen. They looked simple compared to Zephyrian technology, but something about them made her nervous. "What are these?" she asked. "Tools," Jake said. "Humans have a saying, the right tool for the right job." He pulled out a device that looked like a metal box with wires. "This one is for making energy shields stop working." Kirathex felt her blood run cold. Every advanced species in the galaxy depended on energy shields for protection. Without them, their ships and weapons were helpless. "That is impossible," she said. "Energy shields cannot be disrupted." Jake shrugged. "Humans have never been good at accepting what is impossible. We prefer to find ways around problems." He handed her a simple radio. "Can you contact your people with this?" Kirathex examined the device. It was primitive but functional. "Yes, but they are 3 days away." "That is fine. We just need them to know where we are." Jake started loading weapons from the containers. "Tell them to stay back until we give the all-clear signal." "Stay back? Why?" Jake looked up at the sky where stars were beginning to appear. "Because in about 6 hours this place is going to become very dangerous. The Zephyrians will bring everything they have, and I am going to show them why humans are bad enemies. They spent the next few hours preparing. Jake taught Kirathex how to use human weapons and explosives. She was surprised at how simple they were compared to Villani technology, but also at how effective they could be in the right hands. "Your people build things to be perfect," Jake explained as he showed her how to set up a trap. "Humans build things to work when everything else goes wrong." As the night wore on, Kirathex began to understand what he meant. Human weapons were easy to repair and modify. Their tactics were flexible and unpredictable. Where other species relied on superior technology, humans seemed to rely on superior thinking. "Why do you fight this way?" she asked as they rigged explosives in the mining tunnels. "Because we have to," Jake said. "Humans are not the strongest species or the smartest or the fastest, but we are the most stubborn. We do not give up, and we do not forget our enemies." Just before dawn, the Zephyrian reinforcements arrived. Kirathex counted 6 ships landing in the valley, carrying at least 200 warriors. They came with heavy weapons and war machines that could level buildings. Jake watched them through his binoculars and smiled. "Perfect. They brought everything. How is that perfect? Kirathex asked. We are going to die. Maybe, Jake said. But if we do this right, we are going to take a lot of them with us. And the ones who survive will have a story to tell. He activated the device that disrupted energy shields. Across the valley, the Zephyrian equipment began to malfunction. Their weapons stopped working, their armor failed, and their war machines ground to a halt. The Zephyrians stood in the open, confused and helpless. They had never faced an enemy who could turn their own technology against them. Jake picked up his rifle and looked at Kirathex. Ready to see how humans fight a real war? The first explosion brought down half a mountainside on top of the largest group of Zephyrians. The second explosion collapsed the tunnel system they were using for cover. By the time Jake started shooting, the enemy was already broken and scattered. Kirathex had read about human military tactics in the database, but seeing them in action was different. Jake did not try to win through superior firepower or better technology. Instead, he used the environment, psychology, and sheer unpredictability to destroy an enemy that should have overwhelmed him. Within an hour, most of the Zephyrian force was dead or fleeing. The survivors stumbled back to their ships, too shocked and scared to fight anymore. But Jake was not finished. As the ships tried to take off, he activated another device from his cargo. The ship's engines failed and they crashed back to the ground. Now they walk home, Jake said, if they can find the way. Kirathex stared at the destruction around them. An entire Zephyrian battle group had been defeated by one human and his primitive weapons. How? Was all she could say. Jake reloaded his rifle and checked his equipment. Humans have been fighting each other for thousands of years. We got very good at it. When we finally stopped fighting ourselves and started looking at the stars, we brought all that knowledge with us. He looked at the few surviving Zephyrians who were limping away across the desert. Those ones will go home and tell their friends. What happened here? Word will spread that humans are not the easy targets they thought we were. Is that why you let them live? Partly, Jake said, but mostly because dead enemies do not learn lessons. Live enemies do. Kirathex realized she was witnessing something historic. This was not just a battle. It was the moment when the galaxy learned that humans were real, and they were dangerous. The question now was what would happen next. The ground shook as massive engines roared overhead. Kirathex looked up to see a Zephyrian battlecruiser descending through the atmosphere like a falling moon. The ship was enormous, easily a mile long, bristling with weapons that could turn the entire valley into molten glass. That is not good, she said, though the words seemed far too small for what they were facing. Jake watched the ship through his binoculars, completely calm. Actually, it is perfect. I was hoping they would do something stupid like this. Kirathex stared at him. That ship can destroy everything within 50 miles. How is that perfect? Because it means they are angry, Jake said. Angry enemies make mistakes, and that ship is the biggest mistake they could make. The battlecruiser settled into a hover pattern above the valley. Weapon ports along its hull began to glow as they charged for orbital bombardment. A voice boomed down from speakers on the ship, speaking in heavily accented Villani. Surrender now and your death will be quick. Continue to resist, and we will make this planet uninhabitable for 1,000 years. Jake picked up his radio and switched it to the same frequency. When he spoke, his voice carried across the valley with perfect clarity. This is Jake Morrison of the human military. You have 30 seconds to leave this system or face the consequences. Laughter echoed from the ship's speakers. Human, there are no humans here, only legends and fairy tales. 25 seconds, Jake said calmly. You are one primitive alien with crude weapons, the Zephyrian commander replied. We are a battlecruiser with enough firepower to crack continents. Surrender or die. Jake looked at his watch. 15 seconds. The weapon ports on the ship flared brighter. Targeting lasers swept across the ground, painting red dots on the rocks around them. The air itself seemed to vibrate with contained energy. 10 seconds, Jake said. Enough, the commander shouted. You will burn with the rest of this worthless planet. Jake smiled and pressed a button on a device from his cargo. Containers. 5 seconds. 4, 3, 2, 1. Nothing happened. The Zephyrians laughed louder. Your human tricks do not work on us, primitive. Now you will learn the price of defying the Zephyrian Empire. The ship's main guns fired. Beams of pure energy lanced down toward the mining station with enough power to vaporize everything in a square mile dot. The beams struck an invisible barrier 10 feet above the ground and scattered harmlessly in all directions. The energy splashed across the sky like water hitting glass. Beautiful and completely useless. Silence fell over the valley. What? The commander's voice was much quieter now. That is impossible. Jake picked up his radio again. Human military, technology courtesy of the research division. Your energy weapons will not work within this field, but do not worry. Ours still work just fine. He opened another cargo container and pulled out the largest weapon Kirathex had ever seen. It looked like a metal tube with fins on one end and a cone-shaped tip on the other. What is that? She asked. Kinetic penetrator, Jake said as he set up the weapon on a simple tripod. Sometimes called a railgun, it throws a metal slug at about 10% of light speed. Kirathex felt her mouth fall open. That is impossible. The energy requirements alone would require a fusion reactor, yes, Jake said. Good thing my ship had one. He aimed the weapon at the battle cruiser and pressed a firing stud. There was no flash, no sound, just a barely visible streak that reached from the ground to the ship in less than a heartbeat. A section of the cruiser's hull simply disappeared. The metal slug punched through the ship's armor like it was paper. Traveling from one side to the other and continuing into space beyond. Alarms began wailing on the ship. Atmosphere vented from the hole in explosive puffs, carrying debris and unfortunate crew members with it. That was a warning shot, Jake said into his radio. The next one goes through your reactor core. You have 60 seconds to begin evacuation procedures. The ship's commander was screaming orders in his own language. The cruiser began to turn, trying to bring different weapons to bear. But Jake fired again. This time the slug took out an entire weapon battery, leaving a gaping wound in the ship's side. 45 seconds, Jake said. You cannot do this, the commander shouted. We are the Zephyrian Empire. We have ruled this sector for 1,000 years. 30 seconds. Escape pods began launching from the ship as the crew abandoned their posts. The commander was still trying to get his weapons working, but every system that depended on energy was failing inside Jake's barrier field. This is not over, human, the commander transmitted as his own escape pod ejected. The Empire will send 1,000 ships to avenge this insult. 20 seconds. The cruiser was trying to climb away from the planet now, its engines straining against gravity and damage. But Jake had already calculated the trajectory. He adjusted his aim and fired. One more time. The slug struck the ship's main reactor. For a moment, nothing happened. Then a ball of white light expanded from the impact point, consuming the entire cruiser in a fusion explosion that lit up the sky like a second sun. Jake lowered his weapon and checked his watch. 15 seconds to spare. Not bad. Kirathex sat down heavily on a nearby rock. She had just watched one human destroy a ship that could have conquered her entire homeworld, with weapons that looked like they belonged in a museum. How? She asked for the second time in 2 days. Jake began packing up his equipment with practiced efficiency. Humans learned early that the best technology is not always the most advanced technology. Sometimes the best technology is the one that works when everything else fails. He gestured at the burning wreckage falling from the sky. Their ship depended completely on energy weapons and shields. Take those away, and it becomes a very expensive target. But how did you know they would bring a battlecruiser? Because they are Zephyrians, Jake said. They always respond to embarrassment with overwhelming force. It is their weakness. Kirathex thought about the escape pods that had scattered across the planet. The survivors will tell others what happened here. Yes, they will, Jake agreed. They will tell the story of how one human destroyed an entire battle group with primitive weapons. Some will not believe it, but some will. And those ones will start asking questions about what else humans can do. Is that what you want? To scare the galaxy? Jake considered the question as he loaded his gear back into containers. Fear is a tool like any other. Used correctly, it can prevent wars instead of starting them. If other species know that attacking humans is expensive and dangerous, they might choose to talk instead of fight. A new sound filled the air. More ships were approaching, but these moved differently. They came slowly, peacefully, with their weapons powered down. Villani ships, Kirithek said, reading her scanner. My rescue team. Right on time, Jake said. Now we can have that conversation. As the Villani ships landed, Kirithek realized that this moment would change everything. The galaxy had just learned that humans were real, and they were nothing like the story said. They were not 10-foot-tall monsters with claws and fangs. They were something much more dangerous. They were people who had spent thousands of years learning how to win wars, and now they were finally ready to introduce themselves to their neighbors. The question was whether the galaxy was ready to meet them. 3 weeks later, Kirithek stood in the council chambers of the Villani High Command on their homeworld. The room was filled with the most important leaders of her species, all of them listening to her report about the human named Jake Morrison. The implications are staggering, said Elder Moran, the head of the council. If your report is accurate, humans possess military technology that could upset the balance of power throughout the galaxy. It is not just their technology, Kirithek replied. It is the way they think about warfare. Every other species tries to win through superior firepower or better shields. Humans win by making the enemy's advantages meaningless. She activated a holographic display showing the wreckage of the Zephyrian battlecruiser. Even 3 weeks later, pieces of the ship were still falling from orbit like shooting stars. They destroyed a mile-long warship with a weapon that looked like a metal tube, she continued. They turned the Zephyrians' own technology against them and made an entire battle group retreat in terror. Elder Seven, the military advisor, leaned forward. But what are their intentions? Are they planning to conquer the galaxy? I do not think so, Kirithek said. Jake Morrison could have killed me easily, but instead he saved my life. He could have taken my ship when his rescue team arrived, but he helped repair it instead. Humans seem to prefer making allies to making enemies. Unless you threaten them, added Elder Moran. According to your report, they become quite dangerous when provoked. Kirithek nodded. Jake told me that humans have a saying, walk softly and carry a big stick. They prefer peace, but they are always ready for war. The council murmured among themselves. The Villani had always solved problems through diplomacy and trade. The idea of being ready for war at all times was foreign to them. What do you recommend? Elder Moran asked. I recommend that we establish formal diplomatic relations with humanity immediately, Kirithek said. They are going to be a major power in the galaxy whether we like it or not. It is better to be their friends than their enemies. Meanwhile, on the other side of the galaxy, Jake Morrison sat in the briefing room of a human military station. Around the table were admirals, generals, and scientists who had been planning for this moment for decades. The contact went better than expected, Admiral Lisa Kane said as she reviewed Jake's report. The Villani seem reasonable, and they are already asking about trade agreements. What about the Zephyrians? Asked General Rick Taylor. Jake smiled. Word is spreading through their empire like wildfire. Half their client species are asking questions about human capabilities. Some are even requesting protection from us. Good, said Dr. Helen Park, the chief scientist. The more species that know about us, the harder it will be for anyone to claim we do not exist. Admiral Kane activated a star map showing the local sector. Intelligence reports indicate that the Zephyrian Empire is mobilizing for a massive retaliation strike. They are calling it a war of extermination. Let them come, Jake said. We have been preparing for this for 50 years. It is time to show the galaxy what humans can really do. The room fell silent as everyone considered the implications. Humanity had been hiding at the edge of galactic civilization for generations, watching and learning. They had studied every species, every technology, every military doctrine used by the major powers. Now they were ready to step onto the galactic stage, but not as supplicants begging for acceptance. They were coming as equals, backed by military technology, and tactical knowledge that no one else possessed. Phase 2 is authorized, Admiral Kane said. Begin deployment of the Second Fleet. Back on the Villani homeworld, Kira Thex received a message that made her heart race. Jake Morrison was coming to visit, aboard something called a human diplomatic vessel. She went to the orbital station to meet him, expecting to see a small ship like the one he had crashed on Zirian Prime. Instead, she found herself staring at a vessel that redefined her understanding of human capabilities. The ship was beautiful in its simplicity. No unnecessary decorations or flashy energy displays. Just clean lines, heavy armor, and weapon ports that suggested tremendous hidden firepower. Jake walked off the ship wearing what he called a dress uniform. He looked the same as before, but now Kira Thex understood what she was looking at. This was not just a cargo pilot who had gotten lucky. This was a representative of a military machine that had been preparing for galactic contact for decades. "Hello, Kira Thex," he said with a smile. "Ready to make history?" The formal first contact ceremony took place in the Grand Assembly Hall, with representatives from a dozen species watching via hologram. Jake presented the Villani with a treaty of friendship and mutual defense, along with offers of technology exchange and trade agreements. But the real message was delivered without words. As Jake spoke about peace and cooperation, his ship remained in orbit above the Villani homeworld. Anyone with sensors could see that it was heavily armed and ready for battle. The message was clear. Humans wanted friends, but they did not need them. They were strong enough to stand alone if necessary. After the ceremony, Kira Thex and Jake walked through the gardens of the capital city. The sky was full of ships from different species, all come to get their first look at the mysterious humans. "Are you really ready for what comes next?" Kira Thex asked. "The Zephyrians will not be the only ones who see you as a threat." Jake looked up at the ships overhead. "Humanity has been at war with itself for most of our history. We know what it costs and we know what it takes to win. If other species want to test us, we will be ready. And if they want to be friends, then we will be the best friends they ever had," Jake said. "Humans are loyal to those who earn our trust, but we never forget our enemies." A new ship appeared in the sky above them. It was huge and dark, with lines that spoke of speed and power. The design was unlike anything in the galactic databases. "What is that?" Kira Thex asked. Jake checked his communicator and smiled. "That would be the flagship of the Second Fleet. Admiral Kane is coming to introduce herself to your government." "How many ships are in your Second Fleet?" "Enough," Jake said. "The galaxy is about to get much more interesting." As they watched, more ships began appearing. Human vessels of all sizes, from small fighters to massive dreadnoughts. Each one was a masterpiece of military engineering, designed by a species that had perfected the art of war over thousands of years. The age of galactic peace was ending. The Zephyrian Empire was mobilizing for war, and humanity was ready to meet them. But this would not be like the old wars, where civilized species fought with rules and honor. This would be a human war, where the only rule was victory, and the only honor was in protecting your friends. The galaxy was about to learn why. Humans had a saying: "It is better to be a warrior in a garden than a gardener in a war," and humanity had been gardening for a very long time.